Wonderful. So the American woman has spoken and we can begin. Welcome everyone to December's Planners Question Time. It's been 2 months since our last endeavour and dive into the planning system in the United Kingdom. Welcome everyone joining us this evening. As a brief reminder to our home audience watching this back on the Anti-Guru on YouTube, PQTs is a PG-13 event, meaning that there will be swearing, but there will be no violence or blood or anything else like that unless a planning officer from Cheltenham appears, and then there definitely will be violence and blood and everything else like that. But for those joining us this evening, if you feel so confident, you can unmute yourselves and chat away. If you feel less inclined, then use the chat. We're going to go for, I would say, about half an hour in tonight's little escapade and see where things go to. Before I start with questions, a little bit of planning news. It does appear from everything that we've seen and read and heard, including the speeches by the MP for Westminster, no less, that serviced accommodation is now very much on the government's hit list. SAS is likely to get either a new use class or become formally sui generis next year as part of alterations coming forward to the planning system. What this will do to planning in general, I just don't know. I don't know whether we're going to have it enacted retroactively, although I doubt that is the case. It's likely that if you're in SA right now, you'll get some grandfather rights, but it is highly likely that new SA next year is going to be facing an uncertain future with a tightening of the noose going forward. That is the big news in planning right now, and there is a lot being said in the halls of central government on the serviced accommodation question, or latterly the final solution to the serviced accommodation question. What you guys think of that? Don't know. Are you in SA? Is it something you're particularly worried about right now? Do you think the government's just going to whitewash it over and hope that it all goes away? I'd love to hear your thoughts on it, but it's not about what I think, it's about what you want to know. So Planners Question Time is your opportunity to ask me whatever you need to ask me. The chat is there. Chat away. Let's hear your questions as they come tonight. So questions in the chat, please. We're going to go for about half an hour. Let's see where Planners Question Time goes. Over to you. And this is where no one puts a question in the chat. Who wants to start us off? Let's see where this goes. This is always the awkward silence for those of you who've seen PQTs before. There's always this awkward silence before the chat just explodes. There we go. And James Bevan is right in there. Well done, good sir. Right. Bit of a general one, but can you give us a planning related update for those who haven't had the fingers on the pulse over the last 2 months? I've seen potential people mention a few potentially large changes, 5-year housing land supply, etc. But I want to hear it from the horse's mouth. Thank you very much, James, instead of Chinese whispers. There's a lot of proposed changes coming next year. Next year is going to be another one of these weird transition years for planning, where our government tries to work out what planning years does and how they can make it more, let's use the word, efficient.
Or not efficient, as it may be, John.
There's Liam. I know he would be there. Or not efficient, as it means to be seen. So amongst the proposals coming forward, and there are many, in fact, too many to go on about tonight. I might have to do a whole anti-guru on the levelling up and regeneration bill, is the changes to the housing land supply targeting. That has come about as part of a major rebellion by conservative backbenchers desperate to have the 5-year housing land supply targets removed. The aforementioned changes to serviced accommodation. What is serviced accommodation and what it does? We've already had the ministerial statement today on on-site or onshore wind generation, with onshore wind being demonitorized, the moratorium being removed on onshore wind generation. That already happened today. And so the reality is that there's so much to mention, James, and it is all going to come at once inside the levelling up and regeneration bill. Best thing to do is hold on just a few more weeks until we know for sure what is getting through government and what isn't, and then check out the Anti-Guru, because I'm sure I'll be asked to do a video at that stage reminding people what is and is not happening in the world of planning. Reg Francis asks, what planning requirements need to be observed for solar farms? That's a really good question.
There's an appeal just been on that one, John.
Say again.
There's an appeal for that one on that one. May help you on that one. The appeal.
Well, I don't have the opportunity to look up appeals right now, as is always the case. And I'm going to be brutally honest. I've never dealt with a solar farm in my career. Just never dealt with it. There are specialist planners who deal with it. So my advice would be go to a specialist planning firm to take advice on solar generation. I've never dealt with one, and I wouldn't purport to deal with one either, because they are just too specialist for this generalist. That is the problem with PQTs, Liam. We just don't have the time inside of the window of time that we have to go looking at case law in PQTs. But thank you very much for the appeal reference. Sorry, I can't provide an answer on that one, Reg, but at least I'm honest in saying where my limitations are. Questions, please. That is part and parcel of PQTs. That is why we do it, is to give you guys some steer on burning questions of the day. Don't forget to pop that in the chat when you can, and let's see if we can't get the conversation flowing. No worries, Reg, and thank you for the appeal reference, Liam. Reg, Liam's put the appeal reference in there, so have a quick look at the appeal reference. ACP, the Planning Inspectorate's portal, acp.planninginspectorate.gsi.gov.uk is the web address. Type the last 7 digits in and you'll be able to see how an inspector dealt with a appeal for a solar energy farm. Interestingly enough, part and parcel of the government's solar energy security strategy, which is really, really important. And yes, I will indeed write that web address for you, James, because it is part of what we do. And luckily I have it saved as a, of course I do. I've got it saved as.
Don't we both, John? Don't we both have saved that?
Because, you know, Chartered Town Planner and practicing, that's kind of what we do. But that's the link for ACP. Last 7 digits in that search engine. Don't worry about creating an account, because you don't need to, and that will ultimately get you where you need to get to in terms of looking up that appeal decision. Hope that helps, James. Questions, please, in the chat, or if you feel so inclined, make yourself heard. That is the joy of PQTs. You're very welcome, James. John, as I've got not got any experience in commercial property, is there anywhere or anyone who would recommend learning from with regards to understanding the nitty-gritty structure of leases, FRIs, breaks, obligations, and wording? Yes, a RIC surveyor. I wouldn't suggest going to a guru, but those of us who know me know my predilection against the guru world. Not the teacher type, the other type of guru, you know, the ones we're normally talking about.
And no brains.
The I would encourage start with Rick Surveyor or start with commercial estate agent, because they will be dealing with this type of thing day in, day out. And then from that, you might get a really good steer as to where to play with true commercial property. I think we are talking true commercial property if we're talking fully insuring repairing leases, break clauses and obligations, etc. Get a solicitor to do that, not anyone else, because a fully insuring repairing lease has to go on the title deed, has to go on as a leasehold interest, and that really does need to be done by a solicitor in the same way an exchange completion needs to be done by a solicitor. So take advice from the experts in the field. Don't default to a guru, because I can't vouch for the quality of their advice if I am brutally honest, and I always am. So I hope that helps, James. It's probably not as clear cut an answer as I'm normally inclined to give, but hey, you know, it's outside of my wheelhouse, so to speak, and not one I really want to give any assured advice on. More questions, please. Let's see where this goes. And don't be shy. That's the whole point of Planners Question Time. We're going to be doing this next year once a month, and specifically for our good friends in the Victory Facebook group and those who have been and done the Victory plan. They have their own touch point with me, and they will get a heads up when we're about to do PQTs. So if you've done the Victory plan, hey, it's that little bit of added value, that little extra touch point with me once a month, albeit it's late in the evening and it's me or I believe Emmerdale. So it's your choice really, Emmerdale Farm or me on a Monday.
Or planning assignment.
Or what?
Planning assignment.
Or a planning assignment, yes. Indeed, Liam, you really should be doing your homework. Any other questions, please put them in the chat. That is what this is for. That is what we're here to do. I think I've answered everyone so far. What do people think of the next year? I mean, it's an important question, really. What do we think people think of next year? So James asked, knowing you, the Victory plan will be improved and iterated over time. James, it's iterated every 3 months. So every time we run one, it's a fresh iteration. I've already started tweaking based on the feedback that we got in V2. Really need to come up with a different name, short name for it. But we got feedback from Victory 2, and that gets fed into Victory 3. Do you have space on any future courses? I'm sure we will, and the alumni inside the Victory group will of course get heads up on when the next one is coming. Cheeky discounts, I'm afraid not, as much as I would like to give them. That's because Victory is run on the full cost recovery model. How much it costs to run is how much we charge for it, and not a penny more. So we can't charge less than it costs to run, if that makes sense, James. That's why we have it at a low cost, and we don't offer any cheeky discounts on it because it costs that much to run. But yes, it is iterated every quarter, every 3 months, and that is based on the changing nature of planning. Unfortunately, the government can't leave planning alone. And because it can't leave planning alone, I don't think I'm going to have a clear 3 months where it's the same month to month. And that's why they have series numbers. So that's why we've had Victory Series 1, V1 and V2, and we're moving on to V3 and V4 next year. V3 is in March, V4 is in June, V5, if we get that far, will be in September, and V6 will be in December again. So we then start that pattern of March, June, September and December accordingly. That's the whole point of it. I hope that sort of answers your question there, James. Any planning questions, please put them in the chat. That is what this chat is there to do. Otherwise, it's just going to sound like a big sales pitch for Victory, which is not what this is supposed to be at all. But for those of you who have been on Victory, I'd love to hear what you thought. Reg asks, do you see the possible removal of the 5-year land supply as a good thing for developers? No. No. At the moment, the 5-year housing land supply or housing delivery test targets that we have are the only big stick to hit a council with. They're the only big impetus that we have to say to a council, hey guys, you are misbehaving. I honestly don't see how removing that big stick is going to help developers going forward. It is one of those things. Now, as Liam quite rightly points out, the big planning barristers have been abusing it to a substantive degree, and that is why the government is seeking to get rid of that point of abuse. I think if it was refined, if it was tweaked and refined, and the brakes on it were given more weight, then we might have a very different argument there. But just removing it altogether is a big problem for developers. Georgie says, I'm in the process of converting commercial small office into a 1-bed SA. Hopefully we'll finish by April, May 23. If there were to be law changes in SA, what steps do I need to take from now onwards? That's a great question, Georgie. Now, as I said at the beginning, it is likely, because planning works proactively, not retroactively, that any SA unit that existed before the change that we haven't seen yet would be okay. You would essentially have what are called grandfathering or appointed day rights to continue using it as if it hadn't happened. That does, however, depend on the area you're in the country and whether or not they brought in SA control ahead of time. So areas like Oxford, Cornwall, Essex, London, they've all brought in SA control ahead of time. London 1972 is when SA control came in. So they've been well ahead of the curve. So it all depends on when that controlling force came in. But if you're in an area where it isn't controlled right now, then you should be okay. I mean, in Essex, the authority that controls it heavily is Southend. And Southend has a requirement that if you're going to use it for SA, rented on booking.com or Airbnb, then you need planning permission, and that planning permission must go to a class C1. I've dealt with a couple in Southend. They go through okay. You need to think about parking. You need to think about bin storage. Clacton is tendering council, so you should be all right. It depends on how ahead they're going to be. Now, they are not quite a bordering authority. There are a few authorities in between tendering and Southend. Southend being at the bottom of Essex, tendering being much further up. So reality is, look, it's dependent on when it comes in then, and how that individual council takes it, whether or not they think they have a problem. The big issue with SA is, again, it's abuse. It's been used heavily by property investors to make residential property work a darn sight harder. It's been oversold by gurus who have told property investors, hey, you don't have to worry about an HMO because it's SA. And so it's been used to circumvent HMO controls. It's been used to do a lot of things. And because of that, that's where we are. 20-minute cities active travel. Do you think they will be as big as the newsreels are saying in the levelling up regeneration bill? Are you talking here about Oxford and its idea of locking residents in to a
that and other things with development frameworks now wanting more cycling and walking and brownfield regen on large sites.
But this is already big news. I mean, this is already a thing, because we've had a drive towards sustainability ever since NPPF 1, and we're on NPPF
in a weak way, John.
Well, it's been paragraph 6 and 7 of the NPPF pretty much since the NPPF was the NPPF, and it remains paragraph 6 and 7. I think there has to be a push towards more and more sustainable ways of living. I don't think we can just carry on going as we're going. But ultimately, look, will it be big? Yes, I think it will. Will it be, or could it be the next big thing? I think there's an argument for that, especially if you consider that, you know, if you're reusing existing brownfield land, if you're demolishing and rebuilding, if you're doing changes of use of existing buildings, then in certain circumstances you're exempted from CIL. And with the changes to CIL being proposed, going to a nationalised infrastructure levy with percentage of GDV as the target, not square meters, and with affordable housing bundled into that, I can see that being a very sort of interesting tweak, shall we say, to focus people's minds on reusing brownfield land. The most sustainable form of development possible is to reuse an old building rather than knocking it down and starting again.
Encapsulated carbon. It's already got encapsulated carbon in it, hasn't it?
Exactly. There's no point in rebuilding something new if converting it is better. James asks, is there a typical place on a council's website to find a list of all their Article 4s without having to read their development plan cover to cover? Yes, James, they have to have a web page on their website that says all their Article 4s, and you normally find it by Googling. Google is one of the planner's very best tools. You can Google your council, let's say Durham, and Article 4 directions, and normally that will reveal the top result, and the top result will be the webpage on their own website that reveals all their Article 4 directions. Do not forget to read them cover to cover, because they will not be broadband, they will be specific, and the modern Article 4s have to be specific to an area. So yes, there is indeed Google your council and Article 4 directions, and that will reveal that page, which will then tell you all of the things they've taken away from the toy box.
You may also find brownfield sites there as well.
You may also find the brownfield list as well. Indeed. 5 minutes left then. We've just got going, we've just got flowing, and the questions now start to appear. Any other questions, please? I won't say last orders at the bar, but pop them in the chat and we'll be more than happy to answer them.
Heat pumps in district heating.
Are there minimum space standards enforced for ground floor commercial units when severing off resi at the back? Right. No, there are no legal minimums. But if you're trying to argue that the ground floor unit is still viable as a ground floor shop, then you have to prove it, right? There are a couple of different ways of proving it. Either you have a pre-signed tenancy agreement for the square meterage that you're leaving behind. So you have a tenancy agreement in place for that square meterage you're leaving behind with an occupier willing to rock in, or it's already operational and they've already moved in. Or you adopt what's called I call the last chicken in the shop principle, which is you do not want to be the last chicken in the shop. You do not want to be the smallest shop on that street. To do that, it's quite simple. You do a quick survey, normally on the Valuation Office Agency website, voa.gov.uk, of the size of retail units that are in that street, and you aim for the middle ground. You try not to be the smallest, and you obviously don't be the biggest, but you aim for the middle ground. That makes it very difficult for accounts to turn around and say your shop isn't viable if there are other shops that are smaller than you that are viable. But you have to be able to prove that viability. So whilst there are no standards in place, you absolutely have to prove that you're still viable as a shop. And that's to comply with policy. I hope that's helpful. James, we're getting through some stuff tonight, aren't we, Liam? We're really cracking through. James likes that answer as well. That's a good answer. Excellent. This is good. It's
PD. PD isn't over. Actually, do you think PD might get changed by LURB?
Do I think it's going to get changed? No. I actually think we're going to get stuck with it as it is for a while. Two reasons. One, we're on Amendment 26 of the General Permitted Development Order 2015. And I think it's time the government settled down a little bit and maybe put on some slippers, had a pipe, a nice glass of brandy, and stopped playing with that part of planning a little bit. And two, the whole industry at the moment is desperately crying out for a brand new General Permitted Development Order. And the reason for that is we need all of the 26 amendments consolidated properly into one document. Now, we, in theory, are supposed to have them roughly every 5 years. A new GPDO is released, ideally. Hasn't happened. And we were expecting one to come out with the changes in 2020. Unfortunately, the government were a bit busy with COVID and Boris Johnson having a party. So reality is that didn't happen. But we really need the government to consolidate it all now and put it into one document. And in so doing, they will hopefully see all the inconsistencies they put in and sort all those out as well. Because
but I think we're not going to have enough time with Conservatives. The Conservatives will get the LURB through, but that'll be it. And then I think we'll be out.
Well, it remains to be seen. Don't forget, of course, that Keir Starmer likes the LURB. He loves the LURB. He really loves the LURB. In fact, Keir Starmer went on record twice during the last 2 weeks of Prime Minister's questions, the other PQTs, where he said Labour will lend the Conservative votes. Whatever number of votes they need to get it through, Labour will make that happen. And so I think whatever happens, the LURB is here to stay. And I think whatever happens, if we end up with a Conservative government, the LURB will the LURB will be with a Labour government. The LURB will be with us with Labour. Mm-hmm. I think that much is very, very clear. I'll give James the final question of the night, shall we? Thinking of ways around the MA time code of 3 months, could you use G for resi above as a kind of fallback? Yes and no. G and MA are mutually incompatible with each other because G creates a mixed use and MA doesn't work well with that mixed use. It was different when it was M and G because they worked together. You could use the mixed use provisions in G first, but MA and G are mutually incompatible because G creates a mixed use. So if you're willing to lock yourself into a G, then yeah, you can use it as a fallback, and there is no time code in G. There's no requirement for vacancy either in G. But if you're unwilling to lock yourself in, then I would wait the 3 months and use MA. Don't forget that 3 months was put in as a gaming clause anyway to stop the kind of gaming that you're suggesting doing there by using fallback. I hope that helps. Right, everyone, we're going to call it there, I think. Great section, great set of questions. Exemptions to the Greenbelt. At this stage, God knows. All in 149, with the exception of County Durham, who can't read a glossary. In fact, I will do that. Me and we're working on an appeal together where the planning authority have failed to read the definition of previous developed land and what the definition actually says. I think we're going to hang the council out to dry on an appeal on that one because the definition is so bloody clear, it's criminal that they've actually gone the other way. Liam, how are you? You read that definition, I read that. Do you think she's forgotten it exists?
I think she's forgot our law module from the same course I am doing now. I think she's forgot to read that law. I think it's hilarious that she did the course about 6 years ago, and now the conservation officer told me apparently I think she's moving up a policy.
Oh, she's going to have fun when she suddenly reads that annex, isn't she now? James, you're very welcome. Everyone else, thank you very much for joining us. That has been a PQT for December. Join me in January. And if you're in the Victory Plan Facebook group, if you're part of the Victory alumni, then we will be posting that in your respective news feeds so that you'll be able to join us again in December. Thank you so much for watching. Good night.